While tidying up the house, I stumbled upon an old lottery ticket, a winning one from decades ago. It belonged to my husband. That year I had lost my job, and our son had been gravely ill. I endured unimaginable hardship, scraping together every penny for his treatment. Yet, in my husband's diary I found an entry, 30,000 winnings, all for my darling Rose. But I am not Rose. Rose was the belle of his factory workshop. I turned to him, shaking, my voice thick with fury. "John, what is this?" I flung the lottery stub and the diary at his face, my entire being trembling with rage. 30,000. Back then, that kind of money could have changed our family's fate. Yet, he had given it all away to someone else, without a word. A flicker of panic crossed his face, but not because he had been caught. No, he was afraid I might damage those precious items. He hastily picked them up, his fingers gently smoothing the paper as if they were treasures. "Why are you rummaging through my things? It's all in the past now. We're living peacefully. Why bring it up? Bring it up. Is that what you call it?" My voice rose, raw and shaking. That year our son was gravely ill. Both of us were jobless. If you had just kept 10,000, just enough to save him, I wouldn't have uttered a word. But you gave it all to Rose. You watched me suffer, watched our child writhe in pain. Later, when I begged you to ask her for help, you told me, "Rose is struggling too." Struggling? If she had been struggling, would she have taken that money so easily? His excuses rang in my ears, weak, pathetic. Perhaps this was our fate. Fate? If you had brought that money home, my son wouldn't have suffered delayed treatment. He wouldn't have become intellectually disabled. Someone else deserved to suffer, not him. My hands curled into fists. "John, do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Even if she marries 8 times, it'll never be your turn." I wanted to confront Rose, to demand how she could be so shameless. Living a comfortable life for decades on my family's money. Wasn't she afraid? Afraid of King Yama marking her name in the book of life, condemning her to be reborn as a dog or a pig in the next life. I had loved John once. I had given him everything, even my hard-earned wages. If he had only told me, only explained, I might have believed him. But he never once considered bringing that money home. And Rose had seen my son suffer. She had seen him go in and out of hospitals, seen his mind deteriorate. And yet she had still taken that money, still visited our home with her little offerings of fruit and supplements, making me think she was kind. I was a fool. The biggest fool. "Don't go." John's voice was sharp. "You're making a scene. You always have to ruin people's lives to be satisfied, don't you? Ruin lives. Ruin lives." I moved to leave, but for the first time in his miserable life, John was quick. He ran to block my path, shoving me so hard that my head slammed against the floor. My vision blurred. The world spun. Through my haze, I saw my son rush to my side, wailing, "Mom!" His voice cut through my fog. "Wasn't it just a little money from Rose? Why are you crying?" I blinked. The dormitory. The enamel mug. John's familiar clothes. My son was still whole, still innocent. Had gone back. I had gone back to where it all started. "Emma." John's voice was coaxing like it had been before. "We're all factory workers. We have stable jobs. Rose's husband is useless. She's struggling to raise her child alone. Can you spare some money to help her out?" I remembered now. In my past life, Rose's husband had squandered their money. She had cried in the workshop, and John had come home, playing the righteous man, convincing me to help. And like a fool, I had believed them. I had handed over my savings, and we had suffered in poverty for years. Even until my death, I had never seen a single penny returned. But this time I would not be that fool. Without hesitation, I raised my hand and slapped John across the face. Hard. A satisfying crack echoed through the room. Before he could react, I slapped him again. Then I clawed at his face, my nails digging into his skin. "Aimless. Filthy." He staggered back, stunned. I must report him. I must divorce him. You viper, he sputtered. Whoever marries you is cursed for 8 lifetimes. I laughed coldly. This man was worse than a greedy merchant. Reasoning with him was pointless. Only violence worked. He tried to retaliate, but I knew men like him. I kicked him where it hurt. He doubled over, gasping, eyes bulging in pain. I slapped him again. My blows rained down, fueled by years of betrayal, years of suffering. Stop, he howled. You'll ruin her reputation. I bared my teeth. Ruin her reputation. What about mine? What about my son's? John clutched his groin, writhing on the ground. Emma, you want to divorce me just for this? If I had known, I wouldn't have married someone as narrow-minded as you. I let out a bitter laugh. You think I'd let you go that easily? Reasoning wouldn't work. No, only fear would keep a man like John in line. Grabbing the broom, I brought it down on him. We're still married, John. Me hitting you is just a family matter. The broom landed again. But once we're divorced, another hit. I won't have this chance anymore. I howled. The neighbors would hear. I didn't care. Rose wants money. I hissed, raising my voice. Let's see if she dares beg from another woman's husband again. He whimpered, curling up on the floor, defeated. And I smiled. This time I would win. When she had a husband, as long as he didn't fight back, I would just silently keep hitting him. John also realized this. It made sense. He was genuinely devoted to Rose and afraid I would damage her reputation. He endured being beaten with a broom for half an hour until I was exhausted before he dared to open his mouth. Emma, you've hit me enough, please stop. I've hit you enough. Now it's time to talk divorce. Our son belongs to me. This house was allocated to me by the factory. You move out. Furthermore, you must pay child support. Hearing this, John immediately sprang up from the ground. Emma, you not only want a divorce but also want me to leave empty-handed. I didn't know you were this greedy before. I don't agree. Don't agree. Right now, Rose's husband hadn't died yet. John hadn't won the lottery. Most importantly, my son wasn't sick yet. I must divorce John. I must make money. I can't let my son and I suffer like in my previous life. Thinking back, every month after John received his salary, he would say he was helping a colleague with this, lending money to a friend with that, or claiming he lost money. In short, his salary rarely came home. Thinking of this, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face again. Whether I'm greedy or not is none of your business. You don't have a penny. Living off my salary. You leeching man, you money-grubbing man. You don't agree to a divorce. Fine, then we'll go to the factory and make it clear. Let's see if your wages are given to Lee or to that vixen. I want to ask. Is there any reason in this world for a wife to support her husband while the husband uses the money to support another woman's husband? This era isn't like later times. Everyone in the factory knows how much everyone earns. Moreover, the whole dormitory area lives together as neighbors. Who doesn't know our family situation? As long as I make a big deal out of it, a little investigation and everything will be exposed. By then, even if John wants to deny it, it would be difficult. And those who cheat, whether men or women, will be despised. If this news gets out, don't even think about performance reviews and commendations. Even those waiting for promotions in the factory will hate them. I knew the massive layoffs were coming soon, but John didn't. Hearing me say this, he immediately deflated like a punctured balloon. Emma, Rose and I really have nothing going on. Even if you want a divorce, you have to think about Tiny. Does he really want us to divorce? Pause. Before he got sick, Tiny was very attached to John. After becoming intellectually disabled, he understood even less. I could decisively end this marriage, but what about Tiny? Could he really accept it? Seeing me hesitate, John continued. Emma, I won't see Rose again in the future. I will be good to you and our son. Give me one more chance, please. Mom, if you divorce Dad, I will go with you. I was startled. I didn't know when Tiny had stood at the door. He ran quickly to grab my clothes, repeating, "I want to live with Mom. Mom divorced Dad." John's face turned ashen. Without any hesitation, he raised his hand and slapped Tiny hard across the face. One side of the boy's face instantly swelled up, but his eyes remained resolute. Stared down by his son, John faltered, his voice rising. "You little brat, you dare instigate your mother to divorce me? I'll beat you to death right now. A dog can never quit eating." I immediately pushed Tiny behind me, raised the broom, and whacked John squarely in the face. "You dare hit my son? Then tomorrow I will go to the factory and beat that woman. John, if you dare touch a hair on Tiny's head, I will let everyone know your true colors. You are being unreasonable." I couldn't be bothered to argue with him. We'd been husband and wife for so many years. I knew he was about to run away. "John, you dare step out of this door, and I'll go straight to Annie Chatty's house. I guarantee by tomorrow morning, the whole dormitory area will know about your dirty deeds." Annie Chatty was famously gossipy. Anything that fell into her ears was as good as broadcast on the radio. Sure enough, after I pulled Tiny into the room, John stood rooted to the spot, not daring to leave. "Tomorrow we will go through divorce procedures. Do exactly as I say, John. I've given you face by not demanding back the money you two have spent. If you don't agree, I will make things even uglier." It wasn't that I didn't want to get back the money Rose had spent, but now I just wanted a divorce as soon as possible. I couldn't drag this on any longer. I still had to win the lottery. Tiny's illness, the upcoming layoffs, these things were always weighing on my heart. John lowered his head, not understanding how just lending money to Rose led to this divorce. But I gave him no room for retreat, and in the end, he could only nod in agreement. That night, I forced him to pack up his dowry and betrothal gifts, considering them as compensation. We split the things bought later in half. The next day we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau. At this time, divorce procedures were still simple. Both parties were willing, assets clearly divided, and we quickly received our divorce certificates. "Move your things into the factory dormitory today. Remember to make it clear to Rose. If she dares to cause trouble for me again, I will expose everything." John wanted to say something, but I turned and ran, heading straight to the lottery stall. Seeing that lottery ticket still in the stall, I immediately took out almost my entire month's salary and slammed it on the counter. "Boss, I just got divorced today. I'm buying all the lottery tickets." The boss and the surrounding people stared at me wide-eyed. Everyone turned to stare at me. I didn't care about people's gazes. I swept up all the lottery tickets on the counter. "I just got divorced. Assets are clearly divided. Boss, no need to worry about my family causing trouble. Today I'm happy. Buying everything now." There were no surveillance cameras back then. I was doing this to let everyone witness so they could be my witnesses later. By the time I returned to the factory, it was afternoon. In the morning, I had asked Annie Chatty to request leave for me without hiding the divorce. Seeing me, quite a few people greeted me. Most were just curious, but no one directly asked. "Emma, heard you divorced Comrade John." Rose gently opened her mouth, but every word tried to push the blame for the divorce onto me. I hadn't even settled scores with her yet, and she dared to show her face first. I rolled up my sleeves, ready to spit right in her face, but was pulled back by a female worker. "Rose, what do you mean? Can't live without a man. You're too negative. Don't you know women can hold up half the sky?" "That's right. Emma is always diligent and upright. What problem does she have?" "I think the problem is John. How much do you know about other people's marital affairs? Don't arbitrarily blame people." Seeing these colleagues stand up for me, for a moment my eyes turned red. In my past life, when the layoffs came, the whole factory lost their jobs. I was only concerned about how to earn enough money for my son's medicine, how to ensure Tiny had enough nutrition. I had no energy to care about the colleagues around me. But now they were standing on my side. It felt like I truly had a chance to start my life anew. Rose's face paled, her feet retreating. She looked as if we were all bullying her. I just wanted to advise you to live well. See this pretense. I'm so familiar with it. It's been the same for decades. Nothing new. I stepped forward, my gaze locked onto Rose. You want to know why John and I divorced? Fine. I'll tell you. Rose, you are to blame. John came rushing over, panting, cutting me off before I could say more. He wouldn't even look at me. Head hanging low, he muttered. Emma and I were just incompatible, that's all. I laughed, the sound cold and hollow. So this was his definition of nothing going on with Rose. I had no energy left to argue with him. But Rose trembled at my words, tears forming in her eyes. She clung to John's arm, playing the pitiful victim as she always did. Comrade John, why must you defend this petty woman? You're a good person who just wanted to do good deeds. And she's so stingy with money that she demanded a divorce. Chairman Mao said we must have the spirit of dedication. We must do good deeds. I didn't even acknowledge John anymore. Instead, I stepped forward and slammed my palm against Rose's stomach. Hard. She let out a sharp gasp, tears spilling over as she truly cried this time. John wants to be a good person. So he gives his entire salary to you while our entire household runs on my money. Tell me, Rose, what kind of good person provides for another man's wife while his own family starves? The factory erupted in an uproar. Whispers, murmurs, gasps. Everyone had been watching, their eyes filled with complex emotions. Rose opened her mouth, no doubt to spout more nonsense, but I didn't let her. I advanced, cutting her off. My salary supports 3 people. Meanwhile, you get to spend John's money however you please. Look at your clothes. Good fabric, expensive. Look at the face cream you use. All bought with his money, right? Does your husband know you spend another man's wages every month? The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. And still, Rose had the audacity to come looking for trouble with me. Because of the fight, the factory summoned us to the office. I stood before the director, arms crossed, unwavering. Fighting during work hours. What kind of decorum is this? The director slammed the table, sending water from his thermos splashing. Rose, still looking pitiful with her scratched face, sobbed theatrically. Director, I've been beaten to this extent. How can I face anyone anymore? Emma must apologize and compensate me for medical expenses. I burst out laughing. You, Rose, do such morally corrupt things and still have the nerve to demand compensation. The director slammed the table again. His frustration evident. Both of you have disgraced the factory. One is hot-headed, the other shameless. You've ruined the work atmosphere, and there must be consequences. His decision was final. I would lose half a month's salary. John and Rose. 2 months deduction each. Both of them exploded in outrage. Based on what? They protested, Rose panicked, John fuming. Based on your affair affecting the entire factory. The director shot back. If this gets out, the factory's reputation will suffer. No more arguments. But I had already stopped caring. The factory. It wouldn't even exist in a month. Mass layoffs were coming, and I knew I'd be among them. More importantly, in 2 weeks, Tiny's illness would begin to worsen. Director, I said, voice steady, I've come to submit my resignation. Silence. Even John and Rose froze. You what? The director's brows furrowed. I'm resigning. I need to take my son to the hospital. In my past life, the doctor had said Tiny's illness could have been completely cured if treated early. But back then, we couldn't even afford basic hospital fees, let alone dream of seeking proper treatment. Now I had a chance. I wouldn't waste it. Director, if my resignation isn't accepted, then lay off all 3 of us. I'll cooperate fully. But I refuse to work alongside these 2 vile people anymore. Rose and John's faces drained of color. Even the director was caught off guard. Emma, don't be impulsive. You still have Tiny to care for. It's not easy for a single mother. Isn't John going to pay child support? The factory can deduct it directly from his salary. I shook my head. Director, I can no longer work with these two adulterers. I've come today to submit my resignation. The factory dormitory. I'd be moving out soon. My son needed me. That was all that mattered. The director hesitated but finally relented. Fine. Take this month's salary. Child support will be deducted from John's wages and transferred to you. He nodded. Tiny couldn't wait any longer. After this, those two wouldn't have an easy life in the factory. They needed their jobs, and now the entire factory knew what kind of people they were. They wouldn't dare cause me trouble again. Tiny, my precious boy, grasped my hand tightly. His small fingers trembled, but his voice was unwavering. Mom, I'm not afraid. Without Dad, no one will hurt you anymore. Froze. Looking down at my son, I saw the determination in his eyes. Then he smiled, small yet radiant. Mom, I had a dream, he said softly. In the dream, Dad pushed you down. You bled a lot. Dad is bad. I don't need him anymore. I only need you. My heart clenched. Had Tiny remembered his past life too? Or was it just a nightmare, a painful fragment of memory lingering in his subconscious? I squeezed his hand, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, my love. It was just a dream. We don't need him anymore. Determined to give Tiny a future, I made an appointment with a doctor who had treated him in my past life. After examining Tiny, the doctor sat solemnly across from me. You came just in time. The disease hasn't worsened yet, but there's bad news. Our hospital doesn't have the equipment to treat him. You need to take him to Beijing. Beijing. Expensive. The cost of travel, medical treatment, living expenses. My mind swirled with numbers I couldn't afford. Doctor, I said, voice strong despite the fear gripping my heart. We'll go. Please prepare the referral letter. Thank you. The doctor looked at me in astonishment but quickly nodded, giving detailed instructions on how to save money and what to prepare. Leaving the hospital, Tiny and I walked through the factory dormitory, hand in hand, tears slipping silently down our faces. Soon word spread. Emma was taking her son to Beijing for treatment. Neighbors began stopping by, slipping eggs and small amounts of cash into my hands. Take it, Emma. For Tiny. I thanked each and every one of them. And then I went to redeem my lottery ticket. It wasn't just 30,000 yuan. It was much, much more. The moment the news spread, whispers turned to gasps. Emma, the divorced woman, had just become rich overnight. The money in my hands was enough to make people's eyes turn red with greed. I clutched it tightly, carefully securing it in my belongings. Without wasting a moment, I bought the train tickets, packed up our things and left that very night. I wasn't going to give trouble any time to find me. A sharp rapping on the door shattered the silence. My heart sank. I had a feeling I knew who it was. I opened it and there stood John. His lips moved but no words came out. Just as I was about to slam the door in his face, a foot wedged itself into the frame. Sister Emma, Sister Emma. Rose's sickeningly sweet voice rang out. The same woman who had tried to humiliate me just days ago was now smiling at me like an old friend. I heard you won tens of thousands in the lottery. Congratulations. She brazenly pushed her way in, her eyes glittering with calculation. I could already see what she was plotting. Sister Emma, you wouldn't be so unreasonable, would you? Even if you're divorced, you should give half to Comrade John, right? She added, her tone dripping with false concern. John didn't meet my eyes. He mumbled. Treatment doesn't need that much money, Emma. And those are lottery tickets we bought before the divorce. The winnings should be split half and half. Rage boiled inside me. The audacity. John's face was thicker than a city wall. Sister, listen to me, Rose simpered. A day's husband and wife, 100 days of kindness. You won so much money. How can you spend it all alone? Share half with your ex-husband. Even if you can't be husband and wife, you can still be friends. Before I could shove them both out, Rose's husband squeezed in two. It seemed greed outweighed the humiliation of being made a fool. "Sister Emma, you have so much money now. Lend me some. Or better yet, split half with John and he can lend it to me." The three of them shamelessly pushed and jostled, trying to force their way into my home. But I stood firm, blocking their way. Hearing the commotion, Tiny ran out, his little face pale with worry. I shot him a look, and my son, sharp as ever, understood immediately. He dropped to the floor and began wailing, his cries piercing through the night. "You bad people. You're all bad people. You want to steal my mom's money. Dad, I don't want to die. Please don't take my life-saving money. I don't want to die. Boo-hoo-hoo." Within moments, the entire dormitory erupted. Neighbors poured out from their rooms, their faces twisted in outrage. "John, what are you doing? Bringing your mistress to your ex-wife's house to bully a mother and her child? Are you even human? I see your eyes light up when you see money, huh? You didn't care about your own son, but now that she has money, you come running like a dog. Report them. This adulterous couple should be thrown out. There must still be justice in this world." The crowd swelled, their voices a tidal wave of anger. John, Rose, and her husband fumbled, trying to explain, but the truth was already laid bare. They wanted the money, but they didn't realize I had proof. I had bought those tickets after the divorce. I had even shown my divorce certificate when purchasing them. The lottery stall owner remembered it clearly. There wasn't a penny for John to touch. Tears burned in my eyes as I turned to John, my voice shaking. "I thought you were only heartless toward me, but for money, you don't even care about your own son's life. John, you're not human." Rage surged through me. I lunged forward, my fists swinging, my heart pounding with years of pent-up fury. I had carried Tiny in my womb for 10 months, endured the pain of childbirth, and spent every moment worrying about his well-being. Even in my past life, when John had pushed me down that day, I had only thought of Tiny. But John. He had money, yet he wouldn't spend a dime to save his own son. A murmur from Rose stopped me cold. "Spending $30,000 on treatment. Will it even cure him? Might as well have another child. Much better." My blood ran ice cold. My entire body shook with uncontrollable rage. Before I knew it, I had lunged at her, my hands wrapped around her throat. Her eyes bulged, her face turning pale as she clawed at my grip. "You vile woman. You want John. Take him. But you will not touch my son's life-saving money. Whoever dares to take it, I will end them." The neighbors pulled me back, prying my fingers from her throat. Rose collapsed, gasping for air. She scrambled to her feet and ran, her husband dragging her away. John stood there, dazed, humiliated, beaten down by the scorn of the entire neighborhood. Someone took the opportunity to kick him hard, sending him stumbling away in shame. I held Tiny close, his small arms wrapped around my waist. "Mama, let's go." I nodded, blinking back tears. It was time to leave this place for good. After days of travel, Tiny and I finally arrived in Beijing. Only when he was admitted to the hospital did I allow myself to take a breath. When the doctor confirmed that surgery was possible, that a cure was possible, I broke down in tears. "Tiny, be good, okay? Mama has to go out to earn money. Don't run around." I handed some money to the family in the next bed, pleading with them to keep an eye on him. Then I left. I had no special skills, but I had one advantage: knowledge. Living a second life, I knew what was coming. Beijing was the heart of the emerging private business scene, and my hometown lacked the latest fashion. If I could bring back stylish clothes, I could build something for Tiny's future. But life wasn't a novel where things fell into place easily. I ran from store to store, sketching designs, begging for a chance. It took countless attempts, sleepless nights, and sheer desperation. But finally I got my break. My designs started selling. The orders grew. I signed contracts. During Tiny's hospital stay, I barely slept, drawing designs through the night, expanding into handbags and accessories. I had no time to breathe. I had to earn money as fast as possible, because my son's life depended on it. Fortunately, Tiny was young. His illness had been detected early and treated promptly. After more than a month in the hospital, he was finally well enough to be discharged. The sight of him walking out, his small hand clutching mine, filled my heart with unspeakable relief. I had spent nearly every waking moment working, scraping together every last penny to save him. And while the cost had been high, I had managed not only to cover his treatment but also to earn a considerable sum. But I knew better than to be careless. A woman alone, carrying bags and money, was an easy target. Without hesitation, I hired a trusted transportation company and found a reliable driver to handle long-term deliveries back to my hometown. When we arrived, everything had changed. The factory where I once worked had been merged, and the dormitory area had been reclaimed. I took Tiny by the hand and went straight to buy a house, choosing an area that, in the future, would become the city center. It was still affordable now, but I could see what was coming. I didn't pay in full, I took out a loan instead. And beyond just a home, I also secured a small shop space. I wasn't just planning for survival. I was planning for a future where no one could ever threaten me or my son again. News of my return spread quickly. My former colleagues, the ones who had been laid off, came to visit. Despite their struggles, they brought what little they could for Tiny, their kindness unwavering. "Auntie Chatty, have you found work yet?" I asked as I welcomed her inside, warmth filling my chest at the sight of her familiar face. She sighed, shaking her head. "Easy to find a job. Emma, you don't know. It's so difficult now." I reached out, grasping her hand, unable to contain my excitement. "Then come work for me. And bring your daughter-in-law too. I'll pay you both." I held out my fingers, showing a number that made her eyes widen in disbelief. She hesitated, so I pressed on. "I just rented a shop. My first shipment will be arriving soon. I don't need much. Just wear the clothes from my store, take a walk, let people see. You have a gift, Auntie Chatty. You know how to talk, how to make people interested. Just tell them the truth. These are styles from Beijing, and they'll fly off the shelves." True to my instincts, within days, my tiny unknown shop became famous. As demand grew, I expanded, bringing in men's and children's clothing, accessories, and more. And with that, I hired more of my old colleagues. Accountants, salespeople, security guards. Each person had a place. I had built something real. Emma Fashion had made its mark. And finally, for the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe. But success attracts vultures. John's parents, hearing that I was making money, soon came knocking, dragging their beloved son behind them. "Emma, we never agreed to this divorce," John's mother simpered, running her fingers over one of the dresses in my shop. Her eyes gleamed with greed. "You'll always be our daughter-in-law, and Tiny will always be John's son. Men make mistakes, but as long as they come back, all is forgiven, right?" I stared at her, incredulous. Was she seriously suggesting I remarry the man who had abandoned me and my child? John's father coughed lightly, trying to appear dignified. "Emma, even if you don't want to be with John anymore, Tiny still needs a father. Why not arrange a job for John? That way he can be near his son." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what kind of job were you thinking?" Immediately, John's mother perked up. Even John, who had been standing awkwardly at the door, lifted his head. "Well," she started eagerly, "we were thinking that we should have the same benefits as Auntie Chatty, with salary and insurance, of course. And John should be the manager of your shop." Manager? My ex-husband, who had abandoned his own child. My laughter burst out, sharp and filled with disbelief. Sweeping the floor. "Maybe. Managing. Absolutely not." John's face darkened. "Emma, they're my parents. You took 30,000 from me, and I haven't even settled that score yet. Helping them a little should be a matter of course. And Tiny isn't disabled anymore, so what are you so worked up about?" He dared. He actually dared. I stepped forward, my voice like ice. You're still cursing my son. John, are you crazy? How can a man be this shameless? The shop was full, and the murmurs of those watching grew louder. People knew the truth. John had never spent a penny on Tiny. And now he was here, trying to twist reality to line his own pockets. He left in disgrace. But I wasn't foolish enough to think this was over. I dug deeper. And what I found did not surprise me. Rose's husband had died in an accident, just as he had in my past life. And just like before, John had gone crawling back to her. They were scheming. Again. This time I wouldn't let them. "Oh my, John," I said loudly the next time he came by. "Didn't you just ask me to remarry you? And now you've already found another home." His face stiffened as Rose clung to his arm, her eyes wide with alarm. "Emma, listen to me." John started, but Rose wasn't about to let him slip away. "John, what about our baby?" she whimpered, clutching her belly. "You said you loved me." John, furious at being exposed, shoved her aside. She fell hard. "My baby. My baby," she wailed, clutching her stomach. But I wasn't fooled. I knew what this was. I had seen it all before. Rose was taken to the hospital, but the child was lost. Her parents demanded that John take responsibility. And so, in the end, he did. There was no wedding, no grand announcement, just a quiet, miserable arrangement. Meanwhile, my business thrived. Tiny grew stronger, healthier, brilliant in his studies. When he finally found love and got married, I watched with a heart full of joy. On his wedding day, as the car was about to depart, a man suddenly ran into the street, heading straight for the vehicle. He tripped, fell. Blood pooled beneath his head. A woman rushed out, wailing, "That's my husband. You hit him. Pay up." I barely spared them a glance. "Call the police." There were dash cams, witnesses. The truth was clear. As the ambulance took the injured man away, I looked at him one last time. It was John. "Mom, what are you looking at?" Tiny asked, adjusting his collar. I smiled, reaching out to fix it for him. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking. You and your wife must live happily." And as for John, to begin with, he should never have existed in our lives. If you like this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like these only at StoryTimes.